phase. So you have to use two different kinds of economics to explain that upswing and the downswing. And so that the upside is driven by supply constraints that hold the potential immigrant who would really love to leave and can't, hold them behind. And then whatever those constraints are, they get to be released over time. So more and more leave. So it needs to be some kind of supply constraint kind of reasoning on the left-hand side. And then when you get to the other side, it's more demand-driven. And I gave you this little picture of how events can be described to give you that inverted U, that life cycle. And you start off again where you got this low wage, you're in poverty, living standards low, and very low exit rates. People are too poor to invest in a long-distance move. And then two things happen. Comes the revolution, the industrial revolution, the demographic revolution. All these things of modern economic growth start taking place. It shifts out the migration curve that I described last lecture. And also, the conditions are improving the quality of good jobs at home with industrialization and city growth. And those two forces, the outward shift in that curve and the upward movement in the wage, get you to a new equilibrium up there. Higher wages and higher exit rates. Moving up on that left-hand side of that inverted U of that migration curve. And assume for the moment we're going to look at the things that are pushing that curve, and we're going to look at what pushed them in the 19th century, then look at what pushed them after 1950 and 1960. And they're going to be the same. But for the moment, just imagine they're being pushed, and then those forces stop, driving out that immigration function. And so they start, when wages go up again, they move along the curve. That's now stable, because those conditions that were shifting it out have stopped. And then maybe late in the game, as it really becomes a mature economy, actually it shifts in, as whatever conditions shift that curve out now, shift it in. So you end up there. So those 4 points describe that inverted U. So now all we got to do is recall what's shoving that immigration function out as countries are undergoing modern economic growth, starting modern economic growth. So what causes it? Well, the bottom lines are, number one, the demographic transition. So you want to look. So the number of young adults, their share in your population will have a key influence on the out-migration rate. There's simply more of them to out-migrate. So any economic incentive that pulls them out, there'll be more that will respond because there's more of them. But of course, if they leave and you're trying to measure their impact econometrically, if they've already gone, you won't see an effect. So instead, you look at the number of kids that were born 20 years earlier, and they will become adults. Some of them have left, but they would shift out that immigration function. So that plays a critical role in the story. The demographic transition, these demographic effects. Second, early industrialization and other growth factors improve earnings conditions for average workers, and that will unlock the poverty trap that held them at home because they didn't have the resources to invest in anything. They just had enough to survive, and now they have resources to invest in something and in their kids, and one way to invest in them is to buy them a ticket so they can go abroad, or somebody buys them a ticket in the extended family. So that's a big kick in explaining the out-migration. Schooling revolutions, if they're taking place At the same time, we're not talking about, degrees from AIM and the UP. We're talking about literacy, primary education taking place. When they get it, that gives them a ticket to ride and to go abroad. Now they have much better skills to exploit the more sophisticated labor markets abroad that expect literacy. And also, anybody who has gone earlier can now help fund and job search for the next ones coming over. And they play a critical role in helping unlock the constraints that poverty plays back home by remittances. Remittances can also be used to build McDonald-mansions, McMansions. Nancy and I saw them when we were walking through villages in Bohol. All of a sudden, wow, that'd be huge. McMansions, got to be remittance money. But they also can be used, to create another nurse and send the nurse off to Singapore or somewhere. Okay, so there are some issues from the 19th century on the table. And now let's look at the late 20th century closer and bring it up closer to the present. And we're going to get exactly the same results with one little twist. Very important policy twist to the story. More on that in a moment. And here these regions are aggregated up into big clumps of regional territory. And the issue here is not only to identify see these peaks in the out-migration rates again, but note that that out-migration, that is, immigration rates are leading indicators as opposed to in-migration rates. So for Latin America and the Caribbean, the rates, as you can see, peak in the early 90s, up to the mid-90s. But out-migration rates from Latin America peaked earlier. Why do they differ? Well, it's all in the denominator, right? And the rates of growth in the denominator, that is total population, in Latin America is faster than is the rate of growth of the receiving population in the more advanced US. So that dictates a difference in the timing. So if you were an analyst in the US or in the EU, you should pay attention to the out-migration rates because that'll be a leading indicator of your in-migration rates or demands for entrance 5 or 10 years later. And what was true of Latin America, also true of Asia plus North Africa, Middle East and North Africa. The immigration rate peaks there, boop, and the out-migration rates peaked quite a bit earlier, a decade earlier. For Africa, of course, they haven't finished their inverted U, so you can't see a difference for them. That number 840 doesn't mean it's 8 times or some number times the number above it with Latin America. So it starts off with an index of 100 at the start of the series. Okay, so there you go. Now let's run a regression and see what you get. In fact, let's run 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4 up there with various bells and whistles on it. And let's just look at one. Look at this one because this is the best one. The observations are 434, 62 countries times a bunch of years will give you 434 observations. So the Philippines in each one of those years over that time period would be an observation there. And here's what the results are. First, demography matters. You look at the size of that birth cohort. How many years before there? 15 years earlier. And then you let them age. And they have a big impact on the exit rates. We like that. That makes sense. Second, as the economic gap between the US and the sending region increases. Of course, that gap is going to differ for each one of the 62 sending countries, and also will differ according to which year we're looking at, so lots of variance in the size. But for all of them, it'll be some big number. And it has the predicted impact. Why would I migrate unless it's to get some return? And so therefore, there's got to be an income gap to push me to make the move. Third impact is schooling. You read this as the ratio of the average years of schooling, all this stuff in logs, because the econometrics works better when you log things. So it's logged. But the ratio of average years of education in the US compared to the source country. And when that ratio goes up, it means the US is becoming much more educated relative to the sending country. That creates a mismatch, an increasing mismatch. It's harder for the immigrants from the sending country to fit into the jobs available in the receiving country if they are more skill intensive and education intensive, as reflected by these schooling rates. So that has a negative impact. On the other hand, of course, if the sending countries have a schooling revolution that reduces the gap with the US, then it'll have a positive impact on the in-migration. What else have we got? Does immigration policy matter? Well, sure, but in the US, it doesn't discriminate between countries. There's just overall quotas. Of course, you can be an illegal and get around the quotas. We don't have that data here, so only legals we're looking at. And the size of that quota will matter in influencing the migrations from any specific country. But it's not country specific. What else do we got here? Oh, poverty index. As poverty increases, and measured with this exotic statistic, but as poverty increases in the sending country, the number of individuals that are under some poverty line or something, then it has a negative impact on outmigration. That is, increasingly found there are just too many poor families who can't invest in the move, and that has a negative impact on it. Yeah, what else we got? Oh, yeah, this is cool, but poverty matters. But if you interact it with number of immigrants from that country that are now abroad in the US, it tends to mute the impact of the poverty index. That's pretty cool, because what it tells you is poor families in the Philippines are only able to invest in the move if somebody is already in the extended family, has already moved abroad and can remit. That's what it's telling you. And then it minimizes the impact of poverty trapping you at home. That's pretty cool. Where'd the other arrow point to? Well, that's enough anyway. So the econometrics is, wow, it's just doing what you want.